I think it's about the time that we let the animals out here at the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. Welcome, everybody. I am your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, the man they call GC because of his genius concepts, because he generates cash flows, and because he's a great co-host, Greg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hello, everybody. Great to be with you on this beautiful Tuesday.
And today we have another GC. I just realized it right now that I'm looking at that. Now that I'm looking at the Zoom invite, we got another GC with us today. As mentioned before, a local legendary business leader here in Jacksonville that led one of the biggest companies here that has, recently been acquired, has moved on to a life of public service as a champion in the Jacksonville school system. His name, Gary Chartrand. Welcome, Gary. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Pablo. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you.
Hello. All right. So before we dig into all of this, I see our usual community is in the house. I see Leo. I see Lewis Carlson. Welcome, Lewis. I see Lee. And we got a couple people trickling in here. Everett, I see you. Ken Moline. Good to have you back, Ken, a former star here. As you all know that you've been back here before, this is a interactive show. We want you to interact with us. There's the Q&A. If you want a question that is asked live on air to Greg or to Gary, either one of the GCs or the PG, whatever you want, pop open the Q&A box that's on the bottom right. You might have to click those three buttons and open the Q&A, but that's the best place to put a question to be asked on air, because as you're going to see, that chat moves really, really quickly, and I might go cross-eyed if I try to keep track of all of it. And last but not least, this is your first time joining us. You want a basic guide to passive income, go to jwbpassiveguide.com, download that guide. It's got the toolkit. It's got the sheet that we always examine in the Thursday edition of the property investment of the week, rental property of the week. Man, I'm messing up today. And you'll really enjoy that. But without further ado, Gary, the star of the show. You started off here as you grew up in Jacksonville, right?
No, I actually grew up in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. That's right. That's right. Tell us kind of how you got here. Give us a little bit about your career at Acosta and what Acosta did in that journey.
Yeah. Sure. Grew up in Bedford, New Hampshire, right outside of Manchester. Went to Catholic school there. Went to University of New Hampshire. Took my first job with Carnation Foods up in the Boston area. Spent 6.5 years with them. They transferred me to Jacksonville. That's how I got here. Somebody was looking out after me. Took me from that cold, snowy place and brought me to beautiful Jacksonville, and I loved it here. I worked with Carnation here for about 2 years, and then I decided to move in a different direction and bought an interest in a small food brokerage company, Acosta, at the time. That was in 1983, and worked there but this is the only job I had after Carnation, actually, my whole career there. 10 years after I joined the company, became president, and then 3 years after that, became CEO, and had a lot of great fortune. We had a great team of people. When I took over, actually, we were in 13 states, doing business in 13 states. And we put a strategy together to build a national firm. So we did a lot of M&A and took the company from 13 states to 50 states in about 15 months and grew the business. And we just had a lot of great fortune. So I've been very blessed. Great group of people that helped build this thing. And it was terrific. I stepped down about 10 years ago as CEO, and then started focusing on different things in the community, like education.
Gary, I don't know if people know just what the Shining Star Acosta has meant to Jacksonville, but the amount of jobs that you have brought and the amount of success that Acosta's had is truly just incredible. I was doing a little bit of reading, $1 billion in revenue, I believe 17,000 employees. And it started, I believe, here in Jacksonville. And at one point there were 26 employees in 1974, I saw. And so a lot of that came under your leadership. Incredible to be able to learn from somebody who's delivered that. And then also, I'm just wondering, really, I moved to Jacksonville after college in 2005, and I know what it was like, and it's so different today than what it was in 2005. What was it like growing a business? What was the business landscape like in Jacksonville when you first came down here and started to grow Acosta?
The business, it was very different than the way it is today, right? And it was very fragmented. We were a sales and marketing company, so we represented companies like McCormick and Clorox and CPG companies that would put products in grocery stores and restaurants. And at the time when I first joined, I think there were probably 20 to 25 food brokers in Jacksonville. And so what happened, like a lot of industries, we had a consolidation and a roll up. And so very, very different today. It went from, I think there were 2,500 sales and marketing agencies in the food industry back in the 80s. And today there's basically 3 big ones and then a few smaller ones around the country. So very almost like the banking world, right? You had the very big that consolidated, and then you have your niche guys.
Gary, what about the business climate in Jacksonville, right? You've been here for a while as a leader. Have you seen a tangible evolution of the industry here in town, of your peers as far as at that level? Anything like that? What's the main difference between the business school back then?
Yeah, well, I think we're also blessed. We were headquartered in Jacksonville, and we had 100 office locations throughout the U.S. and Canada, and actually over in the U.K. I think we were really blessed and to be headquartered in Florida. Florida is very business friendly. It's not over cumbersome in regulation. There's low taxation here, and so it's a great place to start a business. The state of Florida, I think, and Jacksonville in itself, right? Certainly, Jacksonville has changed quite a bit since the early days when I first got here, and I think it will continue to change. But it's a great environment here. One of the things that we need, and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about education, is we need a really high-skilled workforce, and companies are going to go where the skill and the talent are, even ahead of what taxation is. Because if you don't have the human capital to be able to build your business with the right skill set, it's pretty hard. You say, like, why would anybody stay in California now? You have like huge taxes, a lot of regulation. Well, then you get out to Silicon Valley, there's a lot of talent there. So that's why.
Makes a lot of sense. Gary, as somebody that's new here, I find that there is very much this eye on the future, right? Like it feels very palpable, the near term and medium term future to people here. And it feels like it's led to this. I don't know if it's led to it or it's always been here because it's the South, but I feel a very, very real sense of collaboration that is happening between the public and private sector and industries amongst themselves. Is that a new thing? Has that kind of been there? Did that start kind of like in your generation of leadership?
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, we're really a small town when in terms of the community itself where things get done. It's not a Houston or a New York or some of these Chicago. You can get things done here, right? And there's a group of philanthropists. There are those that are very involved in education. There's all kinds of different folks here that want to better Jacksonville. And look, we can always get better. The history of Jacksonville, being from New Hampshire, it was a little bit of a culture shock coming down here. But we've had a history that continues to haunt us. We had a lot of racial inequity over the years, dating back. Jacksonville was an old Southern town, really. And I think we're making strides in that area, but we still have a long way to go to make sure that we have equality across the board, especially in education. The urban core I mentioned earlier, the urban core has been a real challenge to make sure that we have high quality schools so that every child can get a great education and go on and do whatever their heart desires. So we still have work to do. A lot of work.
Yeah, and we're lucky we got guys like you working on it, right? And JWB investing in the urban core, right? Like you're hitting on a bunch of stuff that we talk about here a lot, but I'm real curious to know how did you start transitioning into this life of working more in the public sector? What was it, the cause of education that pulled you in, or did you kind of start going public and then it veered you into education? And how did you end up being so passionate about it?
Yeah, it started like anything. It starts small. When we got here from New Hampshire, we had 2 children and we had some choices that we needed to make in schooling, and they were in public school up in Arlington. I can remember this vividly because my wife was very upset that they found a child that brought a gun to school. And then they actually, after that, set up a scanner so that you'd have to go through. And we just felt like, geez, that's not a good situation. So we actually did put him in private school, but we felt like that the public school system here for years had not been as effective as it possibly could be. And so we saw that, and wanted to try to make a difference and try to figure out how we could perhaps bring some assets here from other parts of the country that would help stimulate a better education for our kids. So one of the first things that we did about 15 years ago is a group of us got together and recruited Teach for America to come here. We felt like that would bring some young, smart folks in. That program was really hot at the time, and we were able to convince them to come here. And it was populated with a bunch of young adults that had recently graduated from college, but not necessarily education majors, but had a passion for educating kids. And they would come in and give 2 or 3 years in an inner city school to try to help the education equity issue. So that was the first thing that we did. And then we've also been big supporters. Michael Ward actually brought it here, called City Year, which is also a great program in a lot of the underserved schools. We've been big supporters of that. And then we were able to get the Kipp Schools here. Kipp is a charter school. It's called Knowledge is Power. They have today about 230 schools around the country, working mostly in the underserved community. And so we were able to recruit them to come here. And we actually took the old racetrack off of Beaver Street, McDuff and Beaver, right off of Beaver. That was Greyhound Racing had moved out of there, and it was sort of a poker house, and they simulcasted the racing there. And it was donated to us, 270,000 square foot, 4-story building. We spent about $9 million to retrofit it, and started with 1 5th grade class. Today we have 1,700 kids in the school. It's in a tough neighborhood. It's in the 09 district. It's predominantly African-American, 100% free and reduced lunch. And we have an extended school day. We have an extended school year, and we're able to operate with a private board. Although it's publicly funded, and run our own curriculum. And we think that we're doing a great job serving that community with that school. So that was the Kipp School. And then from there, actually was the founding chair of the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. And that's still in existence and doing real well. In fact, Rachel Fortune is running that now. She's a terrific lady, doing a great job. And then Governor Rick Scott appointed me to the State Board of Education. So I went on the state board for 4 years. My term was up. He reappointed me for another 4 years. So I spent 8 years on the State Board of Education. I chaired it for 2 years. And quite frankly, got really involved in policy and rulemaking, and really trying to understand how we could improve the system through better policy. So, and today I'm still involved I rolled off that board. I'm actually on the Florida Education Foundation board. It's Jeb Bush's board, who's done some great things. In fact, I got to give Jeb a shout out, because in 1998, when he first became governor, we had a 50% graduation rate. And we didn't have good standards. We didn't have accountability. We didn't have the school choice that we needed. He reformed the system with his A+ plan. The legislatures continued to improve upon it over the last 20 years. And we've had really great results. In fact, Florida was probably looked at in the country as the great example of how to reform an education system. So a lot of good stuff. The graduation rate at 50% in 1998. Today, I think it's in the high 80s. So a lot of great results. And I could give you 1,000 statistics on how, whether it's AP completion or 4th grade reading or 4th grade math, where we were and where we are 20 years later, and it's off the charts. So it's great. Credit him.
And that's really interesting, because I was doing some research for our call today. I started to dig in the numbers here, specifically on Duval County. So Gary, I'd love to get your impression of Duval County as a school district compared to the state, or maybe compared to the country. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at it as kind of we could take the optimistic view or the pessimistic view. And for our investors and our friends who are watching here, many of us are putting our investment hat on, right? And we're thinking about buying investment properties in Jacksonville, in neighborhoods. And whenever somebody asks me or my team about school districts, we take a different approach than most investment companies that would be selling properties. We take the approach that, hey, listen, you're going to be investing in below middle income neighborhoods that are going to have below average schools. So schools are not going to be the reason that you're going to choose this investment. And we even go so far as to say, don't expect it to get any better. The investment should stand on its own 2 feet without it getting better. So we've gone to that level. Now, I saw some really great data. I mean, on one hand, I saw that Over the last 10 years, our graduation rate in Duval County has gone up over 26%, which is more than the statewide average. And it's over 90% according to Duval County Public Schools right now, which is great. We're a B-rated school district, which is better than I expected. Now, we do still serve, of course, our neighborhoods are going to be below middle income neighborhoods. So we do have some challenges. But I think you could also paint the other picture that we have a long way to go. So could you give just kind of a man who has seen really everything as far as the school system goes, your impression of where we are as a school system?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I agree with you. I think the school district has come a long way. Jacksonville, Duval County was disaccredited at one point, some like, I don't know, 30 years ago or so. So we've come a long way. And I think the school district has done a better job. When we say we're a B district, we're a large county. And so, yes, we have pockets of doing really great stuff in the public sector schools. But as we mentioned earlier, it's the underserved community that gets hit the hardest. And it's the biggest challenge, right? To make sure that those kids get a high quality education. And every child can learn for sure, right? I mean, we all come out of the womb. There's no achievement gap when we're birthed. So it's our job as responsible adults to make sure that we provide a world-class education for all children. I have a very strong opinion about how I think we should organize our school system. And I actually think that we need a system of schools versus a school system, right? And I think we should always put students first, right? Adults second. Sometimes we get that reversed. And I also think that we should empower parents to make choices. I personally believe that the public uniform neighborhood school system is outdated, right? It really worked well in the post-industrial era. A lot of people in the factories, and we educated our citizenry to be able to produce and build a great economy. It doesn't work today the way it maybe was designed to work. So what we need, I think, are more choices. And because more choice equals more freedom, right? And so what we do in our system today, and we've made a big stride on the choice piece, but I think we still need to go further. But we assign kids to a school. We don't assign you to a grocery store. We don't assign you to a bank. You have the freedom to choose. If I said to you, look, I'm sorry, you live next to the Winn-Dixie, so you can only shop at Winn-Dixie. You can't go to Publix, Trader Joe's, Fresh Market. There'd be outrage. But that's kind of what we do with children. And that's how we built the system. So how do you change it? How do you get more choice? First of all, you need good legislation to be able to make it happen. You need equitable funding to make sure that we can bring more choice. And the district has done a good job creating more choice as well with magnet schools, what have you. But I'm a believer that also charter schools, and in particular nonprofit charter schools, is kind of where my heart is, to drive a little bit more competition into the system. I think competition has always made us better. It always leads to more productivity and better innovation. And when we limit choice, I think we limit the innovation and the productivity. So I'm a big believer in that. We have the FTC in place for a reason, to make sure monopolies don't exist, right? And the definition of a monopoly is basically if you have 75% market share or better. Well, the school systems have 100% in many cases. In Jacksonville, they actually have 87% market share. There's 13% of the students that are actually now in charter schools. And so what I think needs to happen is that we need to continue to create more choice, especially in the inner city, so that parents are empowered to make choices. Nobody gets assigned to a charter school, by the way. You get assigned to a neighborhood school. You don't get assigned to a charter school. And allow sort of that freedom of choice and empowerment of parents to take hold and build out a system of schools. That's the way I believe it should be. Basically, we have a monopoly of a government-funded, government-run, union-backed school system. Now, is that the right approach? And it's tricky because you want to be able to grow the market share of competition so that, and it's actually been proven that those districts around the country that have gotten, so let's say 30% of their kids into charter schools, not only did the charter schools do well, but the entire district goes up. student achievement goes up, because you have to fight for kids, right? And if you don't get better, your school is going to be half empty. And I think that's, to me, that's sort of the American way. And I believe in it.
So Gary, you, in our conversation, it sounds like you have a very, number one, you have a very wide perspective of what works as a school system, having overseen all of Florida. And you have a very key vision of what you're seeing. I remember you telling me that you got to make it so that the money follows the child, right? So that it doesn't stay, it's not per region, it's not per school. How does one architect a system that does that?
Well, actually, the state of Florida has done a great job with that, because there are two funding sources in the state of Florida. There's operating dollars, and then there's capital for buildings and improvement of maintenance of buildings. The funding from the operating side comes from the state, and that's set by the legislature. So every child throughout the state of Florida in the public system gets equal funding. And they also, if they go to a charter school, that funding follows them in charter school. Now, it doesn't follow them into the private sector. Some argue for a complete universal voucher system. I'm not in that camp. I think that's maybe a little bit too radical, maybe someday, right? But not right now. So the money does follow the child. Where it doesn't follow the child is on the capital and the building and maintenance bucket. That comes from the ad valorem tax, from the real estate tax. And although the district can share that money with charters, they choose not to. And so the legislature, in order to get funding for capital, uses what's called capital outlay dollars, and the legislature actually delivers the funding for the capital for the buildings for charter schools. And most recently, we passed a half-penny sales tax for the improvement of schools, which was great. It passed by 67%. When it first came out, it didn't include sharing with charter schools, and charter schools are public schools. And so that was one of the things that several of us fought hard for. And actually, the legislature saw it as being unequal, and they changed the law. So any county now that either raises their real estate ad valorem tax or a sales tax for school improvement has to share it with charters. So that's puts everybody on a level playing field.
It's really interesting to hear some of these things, Gary. And I'm always thinking about it from the lens of a real estate investment. A lot of our audience is thinking about it that way. And if we have the schools and the school systems performing a certain way, but we see a certain kind of a new approach that could have a dramatic impact on the end result, better education for our kids, especially in our underserved communities. That's something that is really something to take note of. And in kind of doing a little bit of research on STEM to Hub, it seems like that dynamic approach is really both help. And it seems to me that it's helping both district schools and charter schools. And STEM to Hub, if I understand it, it's your baby, right?
Yeah.
That's your baby, right? Could you talk to everybody about STEM to Hub and the impact that you're seeing across the landscape?
Sure. So when I was on the State Board of Education, we were working on making sure that we had the right standards for computer science. We actually didn't have any standards at one time, and we finally got them passed to make sure that all kids had access to I would call 21st century skills, right? And so I saw that we were really deficient there. In fact, right when we started the STEM Hub, I guess it's 5 years ago now, out of the 17 high schools in Duval County, only one high school was teaching AP computer science.
I read that. That blew my mind when I read that, Gary. And now, not to steal your thunder, but all of them now, right?
They do. All 17 do. And actually, we even moved it down into middle school with AP computer science for middle school. I think it's called AP Discoveries. But one of the challenges that we had was we didn't have the teachers prepped to be able to teach. So we started a program with code.org, which is a nonprofit out of Seattle that was put together by a bunch of tech guys that made a lot of money. And they said, hey, we got to infuse kids with technology skills. So they came to town. We first started with FSCJ, and now it's over at UNF. And we've trained like thousands of teachers to be able to teach their K-12 coding curriculum. And so we're infusing that into the day, and then just making sure that we've trained up teachers to be able to teach computer science as well. And we've done that as well. So I think we've gone a long way. We also have focused on the digital divide, right? So not only do we have inequity in the quality of schools in the underserved community, but we have what's called a digital divide. So lack of a computer. Kids have a computer at school, but when they go home at night in the underserved community, they might not have a computer, right? And the other is internet connectivity. And that's not only just in the urban core, but it's in the rural areas as well. I mean, you read about kids taking their computer down to McDonald's and sitting outside of McDonald's so they can get on the internet to do their homework. And we got to fix that. So STEM Hub's been working on that as well. We had a program where we would take end of life computers from corporations, because most of them lease their computers for 3 years. They would donate them, we'd refurbish them, and then we raise money to be able to get those in the hands of kids. And I think we've given out about, I don't know, 1,500 or 2,000 computers to underserved kids, and it's made a huge difference for them.
I wanted to ask you specifically about that, Gary, because literally about 3 months ago, I was talking with my team towards the end of business planning. We were thinking about our IT budget. We were thinking about our computer expense. And I started to think about, what do we do with our end of life computers? Because on our team, when the computer is out of warranty, and if there's an issue and that would affect the performance for a teammate, we're very quick to be gone with that computer, right? We don't have a use for it anymore. But I didn't even know where I could go to create, and like, I gave them to as many friends and family members as I could,
Right.
But I didn't have a place. And I talked to my IT company, and they're like, well, yeah, we don't know what to do with them. We can just dispose of them properly for you. So we would love, of course, to be able to support your mission there. And we have a lot of business leaders on the call right now. Is this something that all companies or all people could donate to STEM to Hub and
Absolutely.
and those in the hands of kids?
Yeah, there are 2 companies here in town that do the refurbishing work. Alluvion is one, and the other one is Urban Mining. Those 2 both do the refurbishing for a very low price. They charge like $50 to refurbish them. So that's where we raise the money, so we could actually give the kids the computers. But yeah, if anybody's listening and wants to get involved in that, STEM2 Hub, just go to the website, stem2hub.org, and you'll see where you can get in contact with Kathleen Schofield, who is our executive director. And she'd be more than happy to accommodate any additional computers that we can put in the hands of kids. So thank you for that.
Our pleasure. Count us up. Count us in.
Yeah. And that's half the battle too, right? Then the other half is connectivity and the internet. And that's a challenge too. And it came to light during COVID, right? I think the district went out and bought a bunch of hotspots for children to be able to access the internet because they didn't have it at home.
So Gary, we're going to take that little piece of you talking about that STEM to Hub and make it a micro content piece that we'll post on all our social media channels so that everybody can see that that's a good resource. Yeah. Gary, as you're talking and you're telling us about this being a Silicon Valley kind of program and the tech tie-ins, do programs like these and initiatives like these provide an opportunity to maybe bring some of those Silicon Valley talent folks to experience Jacksonville? And kind of like I've been saying for a long time that this is Orange County, California 40 years ago. And like the quality of life here is astronomical. Is this something, as we're building out these programs and we're leading the nation with this kind of change that you're implementing, is this something that's going to bring more people to town to kind of like look, touch, see, feel? Is that an opportunity for some knowledge exchange for people on outside markets that can then?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I've often wondered, like, how do you recreate a Silicon Valley? And I've asked that question to numerous people, and the answers I've gotten is, one, you need a really strong research university, and that's lacking, right? Gainesville, but not in Jacksonville. We don't have a research university. Stanford, yeah, that's why Silicon Valley's there.
Yeah.
And then you need an appetite for people to be able to take risk, right? And you also need capital, right? To be able to, when these ideas get born and an incubator, you need startup capital, venture funds to be able to try to accelerate their growth. And so we have a little bit of a challenge there. But what we've been focused on is, because I can't create a research university, for Jacksonville. And is there appetite for risk in this community? I think there is. Is there a capital source dedicated to startups and technology? There are some, but they're small. But what we focused on, and let's get the skills in the hands of the kids first, because I believe it's a form of currency, right? If you have the right skills, like if you can code, you can get yourself out of poverty pretty quickly. I mean, there are 1 million STEM jobs open in the United States, unfulfilled, right? So all kinds of computer science jobs, whether it's coding or web design, artificial intelligence, drones, I mean, you name it, the train's left the station here. And I just think that exposing kids to all of that. Now, it's not for every kid, and I get that. And it doesn't have to be for every kid. But if you don't expose the child to that, I think we're doing them a disservice in the economy that we live in right now. So that's what we've tried to do, is get the skill up.
I was watching a little bit more of some videos on STEM to Hub, and I would encourage everyone to read up on it. Or is STEM2Hub.org the best place to go for people to learn more about the organization, Gary?
That's it.
STEM2Hub.org. Amazing work there. I was really inspired by, even beyond the school day, the after school activities, and it seems that there's a lot of partnerships that you have, I believe, with the boys and girls clubs, Renaissance Jacks. And I was listening to some of these stories out here about young people going to events, competitions to learn how to build robots and all this. It was really inspiring. Would you mind sharing some of those stories about how you've been able to make an impact and really some of those after school activities to really support?
Yeah, we've worked with all the providers for after school, whether it be communities and schools or Boys and Girls Club, and just for their after school programs, to rather than just having the kids hanging around doing stuff, let's teach them some skills, right? And so that's been good. The Renaissance Jacks is a really special nonprofit. It's run by a kid named Mark McCombs. I say a kid, he's like 28 years old. I love the guy. He's from Jacksonville, went to Stanton, was on the robotics team at Stanton. Then he went to UNF, mechanical engineering. And he has this passion and belief that every child ought to learn how to build a robot. And so it's the first Lego League robotics program that was started by Dean Kamen out of New Hampshire, actually. And he has done an unbelievable job. And what it is kids work in teams of, let's say, 8 kids come together and they work on building this robot. And so it teaches collaboration, shared learning, and then they build this robot. They have to program the robot to do what they want it to do, and then they take it to competition. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of these competitions, but it's amazing. They probably haven't had any because of COVID here recently, but they've had them at UNF. It's just incredible to see how excited these kids are to be able to build something with their hands and program it and then compete with what they've built. Pretty cool.
I went home last night and I was talking to my son at dinner. My son's 6. I was like, hey, buddy, I was like, how would you feel about like getting to build a robot? And his eyes lit up and I'm like, oh man, this would be so cool. Right. And I mean, that's what kids love to do. The idea of building a robot, getting to take it apart. It's like a natural thing for call it a 6-year-old, but there have been so many obstacles in the way for so many years that what you're doing seems incredible. I'm just really curious. I hear the stat that you mentioned a few times about there being 1 million STEM jobs like out there, unfulfilled. These are some of the highest paying jobs out there. And I hear so much about how STEM, there's a priority put on it in our school. It's like everybody knows that we need more training, more skills through STEM. You hear it often. I just really have no kind of idea where we stand as in the Duval County community as far as STEM compared to the rest of the nation. Are we ahead? Are we behind? Where are we?
Well, I think because of the work that we've done in the STEM Hub, we're behind. I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but in terms of kids that are taking AP computer science in Northeast Florida, the numbers have grown significantly, not only with all children, but girls, right? Because girls were kind of underserved in this community as well, and Black and brown folks. So everybody, it really applies to everybody. And there may be some of this information on the website. I've certainly saw something just one of our last board meeting that we had that the numbers were off the charts, like 4 or 5 times fold of how many kids are taking or completing AP computer science courses. And on the robotics piece, it's been studied, and that if you go through the first Lego League robotics program, you're 7 times more likely to become an engineer. And engineers get paid well. It's a good job. And you look at the global economy that we're in, and China is 1 billion people, and how many engineers that they're actually producing every year. I mean, it's a national security issue too, right? I mean, hacking and making, we just got hacked. The government just got hacked. So this is a whole new world that we're living in, and we got to make sure that we're skilled up and that we're producing as many high quality STEM leaders and workers as other countries around the world.
And from what I'm hearing and reading too, the impact that is felt the greatest is on those communities that are underserved through what you're doing through STEM to Hub. So it's that amplification of that impact on those communities that are the least served is really amazing, right? Yeah. I mean, that's, you just talked about it. That's your ticket out of poverty, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's your skill set is a form of currency for sure. And if you learn how to code and you're in poverty, you can get yourself out. So that's why we're doing it.
I love that we're going to make a quote card for you. Your skill set is a form of currency. I think that's a really brilliant statement. Yeah. And listen, speaking on skill sets, right? Roger Evans has a really good question here in the Q&A. What about the other skill sets, right? Not everybody is ready to go to college, university, 4-year degree. I'm reading his question, and end up with a huge student loans. What about building more technical schools to have students ready to go after a couple of years and utilize their technical skills? Are you working in that sector as well? I imagine you have some oversight of that at the state level and kind of how that fits into the top end as well.
Very much so, working around it, not deeply in it like I am with STEM. It's hard to do everything, right? But I'm a big believer in CTE, and I know that the state board's been working on it, the legislature's working on it. Look, not everybody is going to go down the STEM field. Not everybody's going to go to college, and perhaps not everybody should go to college. But the trades, for instance, I think we've kind of walked away from shop, if you will, in schools, right? And auto mechanics. And by the way, to be an auto mechanic today, you better know your computers. I mean, I think most of our cars have like over 100 sensors in them and computer chips. So it does move into the CTE world as well. But I do think that we should be putting a lot more time and emphasis on the trades, whether it's plumbing, heating, air conditioning, auto mechanics. Those types of jobs are good paying jobs, and we shouldn't just ignore that segment. And I'm a big believer that we should emphasize it. I just haven't organized anything around it. I've been focused on other stuff.
Yeah. Limited resources, right?
So maybe the person that asked the question can jump on that one.
There you go, Roger. And I got to do, buddy.
There you go. That's what's called passing the buck, right?
Gary, you said something in our onboarding call. You said that there's a difference here in Jacksonville, and it's that the partnerships and ecosystems were built first, and then the school system was ready to listen because of these partnerships and school systems. Can you give me a little bit of behind the scenes on how you do that? How do you reach out and create these partnerships and ecosystems in order to build enough core capacity to then actually get the ear of a public institution when you're trying to enact change?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think probably more important to connect in Tallahassee than it is actually locally, because it's a top-down run system, education in Florida, and they control the funding and they make the laws, right? So that's what legislators do. And so making sure that they're well informed. And again, I'll go back to Jeb Bush, because he put a stake in the ground with his A+ plan to drive higher standards, more accountability, more choice into the system, right? And it was a big controversy back then to grade your schools, right? We're going to grade the schools, A, B, C, D, and F. So there are people that take issue with it. There's issue. We do test kids. I do believe in assessments. We've got to understand where kids are so that we can help them improve. I'm not a big believer in teaching to the test. A lot of people say there's too much testing and kids get anxiety over it and whatnot. But look, that's life. I mean, I don't want to get on an airplane where the pilot wasn't tested. So we need to understand where kids are. But I would say that Tallahassee is probably more important than Duval County in terms of getting the right kinds of legislation to be able to create a system of schools that offers much more choice, and not just choice, but high quality choice, and empowering parents to make decisions. One program that's run here called Step Up for Students is a voucher program that allows low-income kids to get a voucher to go to a private school. And you say, okay, well, is that a good thing? I happen to think it is, because it empowers the parents to make that choice. And look, if you have means, you can move to a better neighborhood with a better school system, or you can put your kid in private school. But if you don't have means, if you are stuck in poverty and you're assigned to a failing school, why not give that family a voucher to go to a private school, right? And so there's about 100,000 children in the state of Florida that take advantage of that each year. It's called Step Up for Students. And it's actually, the legislature's moved that along. There's now family empowerment scholarships. There's scholarships for McKay. There's scholarships for, the McKay Scholarship, the Gardner Scholarships. So kids that have learning disabilities that are not being addressed, let's say, in the neighborhood school, give them a voucher to go to a specialized school that works with children that need that help. So I think the more choice we have, put students first, empower parents to make decisions versus bureaucrats.
Love to get a little more understanding of some of the legislature that's been positive in terms of helping. And I know we were chatting a little bit before here about the idea schools coming in, and against the backdrop of what most people are investing here on this show is investing in below middle income neighborhoods with underserved schools. Can you talk about the legislation that empowered the idea schools to come in? I had never heard about the idea schools before, so maybe why you think that could be so impactful in specifically helping schools that are below average and maybe below middle income areas.
Yeah, Greg, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, Richard Corcoran, who was Speaker of the House at the time, it was his bill and his vision. He and I had dinner at the River Club one night, and we talked about this at length, that there are a lot of great charter organizations that are nonprofit that do work in underserved communities that are out of state that we need to attract to come here. And so how do we put some legislation and some incentives together to be able to attract those kind of schools to come here? And so it was a bill that was put forth called Schools of Hope. And actually, when I was on the state board, we designated IDEA as a school of hope operator. And therefore they got additional funding and incentives to come here. Just like sometimes the city gives additional incentives for people to bring business to the,
give it to Amazon, give it to the companies that come.
Right.
Why not have a similar approach for a school that can make an impact?
Yeah. And so that's what that's about. And that's why actually IDEA is coming to Jacksonville. Without that, I'm not sure they would be here. They're going to open 6 campuses, 2 schools in each campus. So they'll have 12 schools. They're going to target basically the urban core. So it'll again drive choice options for parents. And like I said, nobody gets assigned to IDEA. It has opt-in. And so I think that kind of competition is actually good for the system, personally.
Historically, has it been hard to get charter schools to go into the underserved communities, into the below average school districts or the below middle income neighborhoods? Okay, so this is solving that need there?
It has. It's hard work. I'm still on the Kipp board. So we have 1,700 children over there, and I just love the staff and what we're doing. Everybody's heart's in it. But I got to tell you, it's hard. It's just hard. And it's unfortunate. Poverty is a challenge. I don't care if you're black or white. I mean, being stuck in poverty is a problem. And there's just a lot of challenges of making sure that a lot of times the parents weren't educated, so they can't read to their kids, or they can't help them with their math problems. And sometimes there's a lot of single family households that they're working 2 jobs to try to keep food on the table, and they don't have the time or the expertise or the know-how. So they need help. And I think that's why Kipp, I think, has been so successful in the urban core, because we are attending to the deficits that come to us because of that.
Greg, we got a question here from Lee Bishop. He says, Greg, how does the Duval County school system rating B come into rating the 4 areas that JWB concentrates in neighborhoods for investors? How does that affect it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lee. I mean, to be quite honest, I was surprised that we had a B rating. Our approach is that we're investing in neighborhoods where we can produce the best risk-adjusted return for clients, and also be in neighborhoods that I want to send my team into every single day to go ahead and perform the property management services. And so that sweet spot for us is below middle income neighborhoods. And we've identified 4 here in Jacksonville that we just try to dominate from a real estate perspective, right? That's all we do every day. But when investors come and talk to us and we talk about school ratings, a lot of times people think that a school rating, a high school rating, is correlated to a long-term resident stay. And many times it is. If you're in a good school district, families tend to stay longer, but it's not the end all be all, right? Our property management business has been focused around how can we achieve long-term resident stays in below average school districts, because that is the best spot for us to produce the best risk-adjusted return on investment. And you absolutely can do that. You can sign long-term leases. You can provide incredible service to your residents. You can re-sign those residents. And if you do that, then you're going to achieve long-term resident stays and ultimately a better return on investment for Lee, who's a client, and for other clients out there. So that's a long way of saying we know that school ratings have been below average in our neighborhoods. We accept that. We can still perform a great service for residents and for clients knowing that. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to have somebody of Gary's expertise here today, because what we're talking about with STEM 2 Hub and some of these ideas and this organization, what it's doing is targeting our kids in those neighborhoods to help them more than any other kids in Duval County, right? And the impact that we have with STEM 2 Hub is dynamic. And that, I think, if there's one single thing that can change sort of the rhetoric that I use with our schools, which I talk to them about being below average. If there's one thing that could change that, it is this type of an organization. So I'm excited about it, but we take the conservative approach, which is not like most turnkey rental property companies. They want you to believe that all the school districts are the best and the best thing ever. We accept what they are now, and we don't expect it to change in order to justify why the investment makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think also one of the challenges that we have in the underserved community is making sure that they have good housing, right? I mean, good housing, a decent livable wage, right? That also has to be addressed in addition to the education gap that we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, it's been a really, really illuminating conversation to be able to pick your brain for someone that has had this exposure, that has been at it from all these different levels, has been here for so long, really understands the problem, really is coming forward with a solution that isn't the tired old, this is how we've been always doing it, right? Like you're not taking that tired approach. You're really coming at it. And I think our community is reacting well to, right? Everett Shapiro says, thank you, Gary, for what you've done and what you're doing. Lee Bishop wrote in here earlier in the Q&A. When I was growing up, I went to parochial grade school and was going to be in a mixed race subpar high school in Baltimore. My parents decided to put college funding towards high school so that we could have a better chance of getting into college and out of high school. He was blessed, but the school he was supposed to go to made the decision for his parents, right? So like everything that you're doing here of enabling these choices, enabling the progress of this stuff as a resident and somebody that plans to live here for a long time, and people that are investing here, I think we're really, really lucky to have you. And this is one of those moments where, you know, JWB gets to show that they're not an inch deep and a mile wide, but they're an inch wide and a mile deep in community, and having leaders like you on and building these strategic relationships. So I would love to just give you the opportunity right now, promote whatever place is the best place to either connect with you or support your programs. Can you let our listeners know and let our community know so that we can send them your way?
Yeah, well, and if you want to just get my email out, I'd be happy to converse with anybody. I think you have it. Well, it's probably on the invite, and everybody has it. So if you have any ideas or thoughts, or if you have a disagreement with me, look, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Not everybody totally agrees with my approach. Part of the the challenge in this, and I'm sensitive to it, is when you do have the money follow the child and you have the students leave the system, it does the neighborhood schools that lose the children to a charter school, whatever, have to adjust, right? They've got to figure it out. And descaling an organization is a difficult thing to do. I've had to do it. You guys probably haven't had to do it because you've been on such a roll. But when you have to descale, it's a challenge. So I understand that. But by the same token, I think the long view is that we need a system of schools that have high quality choices, that not every child learns the same, and that and parents know better than bureaucrats on where their child should go to school. And I just believe that that's it. Look, I think if there was one statement I could leave you with, is that every school should have to earn the right to educate your child. And I think when we get there, then I think we'll have a system that is what I would call pluralistic, right? And by the way, education pluralism is pretty much the way school systems are run in democracies around the world. We're actually an outlier that actually just has a uniform government system. And so, and quite frankly, we used to have that. Before the mid-19th century, we had a pluralistic system where government actually funded religious schools. And it was the influx of a lot of Catholics that came in the mid-19th century. And the Protestants got upset that all these Catholic schools were propping up and being funded. And so that's why we have the Blaine Amendment, and 37 states adopted it. Florida is one of them, which doesn't allow you to take taxpayer dollars and invest it in religious schools. So, but if you go to Sweden or Norway, they fund all kinds of schools, Jewish schools, Catholic schools, Protestant schools, what have you. And the government pays for it. And the government holds them accountable, right? But they don't necessarily run the school. And so I'd like to see us move to a more pluralistic education system that gives more high quality choice and holds people accountable to high standards. That's the only way we're going to get a great education system. And then the other thing I'll say is that being in business, that you can never be great if you allow mediocrity to exist, right? And and as an employer, as a CEO, when we had people that weren't performing, we tried to help them all we could, but we would eliminate mediocrity by, replacing that individual. That's harder to do in a unionized public school system. And that's a challenge. If you don't have control of your personnel, it's pretty hard to motivate them to be the best they can be. And look, teachers, I love teachers. They're great. I'm not in any way disparaging teachers, but I think, look, human nature is human nature. And we've got to be able to have a system where we get a better control over the personnel.
And I think we have to have leadership that's willing to say something that they're very passionate about. I know you have a book that's called Unreasonable Leadership out. So it sounds like you're adopting your own thoughts when it comes to leading this charge. Is that right, Gary?
Yeah. Well, it's based on George Bernard Shaw's quote that all progress comes from unreasonable people, because reasonable people basically just adjust to their surroundings, and unreasonable people rebel against it and they produce progress. And that's what some of us are attempting to do here, to just have a world-class school system. And the surveys are clear. The number one and number two reason that people either don't move to Duval County or move out of Duval County are education and crime. Those are the two top reasons. And actually they're kind of connected. So I think when every child gets a great education, has a great skill set that can be used as currency, the crime will go down. People won't be shooting each other, and they'll be employed and be living great, productive lives. And that's what we all want, right?
Yep. That's what we all want, Gary.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you for everybody that has been on the call. We don't take it lightly that we have 22 people with us for an hour in the middle of your day on a Tuesday. It really is the reason why we do this, to put this value out there, showcase amazing leaders like Gary and what's going on in the Jacksonville community, so that we're not just, you're taking the blinders off and seeing around your investment, seeing around the things that JWB is doing, and being totally transparent in the leadership. So if you want more of a understanding of passive investing, go to jwbpassiveguide.com. And if you want a workshop on that, join us on Thursday for our rental income property of the week.
Week.
Where we break down the investment and we mess around with that passive guide calculator. And we do some more tomfoolery when we don't have such a esteemed gentleman like Gary in front of us. But thank you all. Greg, I'm going to give you the last word here, buddy.
Pablo, thank you, buddy. And Gary, thank you for being here and sharing your incredible knowledge and expertise and experience here. It's really cool. As I was preparing for the show, I thought it was going to be a lot on education, which of course is the core message here. But as I was really taking the message in, I mean, this is such a huge opportunity for Jacksonville as a whole. I mean, there's so many parallels to real estate investments or to our business, to our economy, as far as being that talent pool that we want. Even today, we've talked about it being a national security opportunity for us to really train the kids who are going to protect us in the future. So many applications here. It's been incredible to learn from you. I just want to say thanks for spending the time with us.
Well, you're welcome, Craig, and thank you for having me. You guys made it easy, and I appreciate both of you. And also, I've been following your company, and I just can't say enough about how successful you guys have been and the work that you're doing. And I love the fact that you're investing in low to middle income neighborhoods too, because that's a challenge. Great housing or good housing for everybody is a good idea and necessary. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. See ya.
You got it, Gary.
Bye.
Take care, buddy.